So welcome back to another one of our videos. Today we're going to be talking about IT equipment and the best way to pay for it. So in order to help us with that, I've got a couple of people along from the HPP group, namely Darren Jacklin and George Smith. And we're also joined by Rob Partridge from our finance partner, Synergy Finance. So Rob, would you just like to introduce yourself and let everyone know who you are and what you do?
Yeah, hi. I'm Rob Partridge. I'm the MD of Synergy Partner Finance, and we're a commercial finance brokerage in the main, but we do have a couple of niche markets, and one being specifically being IT and technology, which we like to finance, and we partner up with IT and tech companies in the UK to provide what's very the jargony word is called sales aid finance, but really what that means is that we partner up with IT companies to provide them with a finance offering to help them, close sales, but also offer end users that opportunity to access finance really easily.
Brilliant. So in terms of finance, Rob, I think one of the things that comes up a lot is people talk about their personal views on finance, whether or not they use it in their own lives. But the difference, kind of the opinion on that can vary. But what drives the attitude towards finance within a business? What is it that makes the difference between people, whether they do use it or are kind of adverse to it?
I think it boils down to, I can't be 100% sure about this, but I think it boils down to personal attitudes towards finance. And it's simple as that. I mean, we learn early on in our lives from our parents or TV or whatever other influences we have about how to manage our finances. And, you might, for instance, have a father who said, never use finance, always save up, and then, buy when you can afford to, that kind of attitude. Or you might have had a parent like my mum who seemed to get everything on finance, so you sort of learn a little bit from that as well. But yeah, I think it's born early on. But what I do see is a lot of companies taking those personal attitudes into their business now. From a personal finance point of view, we're driven to look at interest rates and getting the cheapest deal and that kind of stuff, and that's totally correct. But from a personal point of view, you don't get any tax benefits from finance. But when you go into your business, you certainly can access certain tax benefits. So I always say, leave your personal attitudes towards finance at the business front door, and then maybe we can explain a little bit further on this conversation what those benefits are.
And George, in a previous life, obviously you worked in auditing, so you will have seen a lot of kind of inner workings of this. Did you see businesses mixing and matching as well, in some respects, buying some things on finance and some things with cash, or was it kind of they either purchase things outright or finance things?
Yeah, I think it's fair to say some companies have a very clear route either way, and and again, it can be the opinion of one managing director or finance director who's got a set of beliefs that will drive that. But I think it's fair to say people do make decisions on a case by case basis, depending on the nature of what you're financing. For example, as Rob alluded to there, it can have other implications from a finance point of view in terms of tax and things like that. And also it's the other commercial benefits that might come from financing when you start talking about longer term contracts and stuff like that. So I think you do have to look at what you are financing, and the cash flow is a massive part of it, but there are other benefits and other areas to look at. So yeah, I don't think it's clean cut that we always pay cash or we always finance. I think it should be looked at case by case and really explore the other sort of side issues that come from how you pay for something.
Okay. And Darren, so obviously we're going to talk about some of the benefits of financing in this discussion shortly. What's the general attitude of people who want to pay cash? I know we've spoken to people before who are almost kind of like, no, don't even tell me about the financing. I don't even want to hear it. What, in your experience, is the driver for that? And is that fairly unique to the IT side of things, or is that an attitude they take across their business?
So I've got a couple of customers that do take that stance, Phil. They're like, we're not interested in finance. We've never financed. Just going back to what Rob and George just alluded to, it's like it's not something we do as a business. We're a cash-rich business. We can afford to pay for everything, and they don't want to even contemplate that finance side of everything. But the flip side of that is they're spending a big chunk of capital out of their business that they don't really need to do. That could be spent on other resources which bring income back into the business. So we always have that conversation with them anyways. Like, I know you've not wanted to look at the finance option, but at least here is a set figure, which is a monthly IT budget essentially for them. which enables them to just to consider, do we really want to spend a big chunk of change out of the business, or can we spread these as unevenly? We know we've got set costs. In terms of the question of do they just do this for IT, or is it every other element of the business that they spend cash directly on? Most of the times, the people that do choose to go down that cash route, is the same for every element that they've got within their business as well.
Okay. So in terms of that then, Rob, to get people to understand when it comes to IT, I think you mentioned there are some businesses that have a mix and match. So is there a difference for a business who are, say, financing a piece of machinery or a fleet of vehicles compared to IT, like an IT solution that might include both some equipment, some labour, some support, maybe things that aren't quite as tangible as people are used to when it comes to financing? Is there a difference in how that works?
It can be, yeah. I mean, I think there's some different schools of thought. And I think the first school of thought is about depreciating assets. And that's a school of thought that's probably born out from the accountancy world. I think George could probably add to that as well. So basically, are you financing an asset that can generate income or make you slicker or better at processes within your business? So if that asset is depreciating, i.e., is it going down in value very quickly and doesn't have really any kind of value at the end of 3 to 5 years? If the answer to that is yes, then I would always say look to finance it, because basically you can generate or match the outgoing costs for that for maybe the generating the income that you've got coming in, and say, right, am I making a profit out of that? Am I breaking even, or that kind of thing? So IT is very much a depreciating asset, especially with the intangible services that surround it as well. But even looking at things like cars or plant and machinery, some things that have a future value, they're still depreciating. They're still losing their value on a day-to-day basis, but much more slowly. For instance, generally people finance their own cars, whether that's through the business or through themselves personally, and because it tends to be an expensive asset, so they tend to finance that. So, but also when the businesses are, like engineering companies, which you tend to deal with quite a lot, they will need to buy large chunks of machinery, and even though they depreciate much less, the chance of them actually going out and buying it cash, it is very limited, because they tend to be expensive bits of kit. But they know if they're buying that bit of kit, that's going to make them a widget, which means they're going to generate 30-40% income from it. Then they know that income is going to easily pay for the asset. So I think it comes down to the different schools of thought, and I'm entirely biased here, because I would always say finance absolutely everything. But the reason I say that is because it depends, I guess, on the leaders of the business and their plans for the future. But it's about what are your plans? Are you, for instance, wanting to grow the business? And if you are, don't tie up your cash in an asset, because what you could do with that cash is maybe market yourself better, train your staff better, get more employees on who can generate more income for the business. So you're using that cash that's more flexible to do those type of things in the business, whereas using the finance will help you generate income from assets within the business.
I think something that's often missed, it's very easy to identify and appreciate the finance cost element, the interest with financing, and a business can jump on that straight away, and that can be a reason why someone doesn't want to finance. But the bit that's a little harder to quantify, and so is often ignored, is the opportunity cost of using that cash for, let's say, IT, and not for something else. So let's pick £100,000 IT investment that you've got £100,000 in the bank, go and buy it, save the interest. But with that 100 grand, that could be a couple of salespeople's salaries for the year to build up a new sales office in a different city. What would that generate in margin and growth for the business? Suddenly that couple of grand of interest is irrelevant compared to the potential you could do with that. And it's getting businesses maybe to think of things differently. But as Rob said, they've got to have the intentions to want to do that sort of thing sometimes. Yeah. And that's why we often see finance being utilized in growth companies or businesses going through change, because they recognize they want to use the cash to accelerate growth or make the most of other opportunities in the business.
And to add to that, a little bit, the interest element of any type of borrowing is an operational cost. So it goes down in the business as an operational cost, which therefore reduces the corporation tax bill that the company's going to pay every year. So, I mean, I would say 99.9% of businesses would always say we want to pay less tax, you know, and if you are then putting that interest through as an operational cost, you will be paying less tax generally for it. And of course, that sort of touches on the fact that there is a new government incentive that came out in April, which is the 130% super deduction tax scheme. And that basically allows businesses to purchase assets and gain 130% tax allowance on that asset. So to put that in simple terms, if it was 100 grand investment like George was talking about, 130% of 100 grand raises that to 130 grand, and therefore most businesses are paying around about 90% tax relief at the moment. So 90% of that 130 grand is just shy of £25,000 tax relief. So, and to put that into context a little bit, that tax relief is gained in year one. So 25 grand effectively gets knocked off their corporation tax bill for that year. So, you know, if you're saying to a company, if your driver is to save tax and pay less corporation tax, then you really need to be buying assets in your business to generate better income, but also reduce that liability. So don't get me wrong, you can get that 130% super deduction by paying buying assets with cash, but you can also gain it through finance as well.
Yeah. Okay. So from our point of view, Darren, obviously the process of the IT solution and the IT equipment starts with HBP Group. As a referrer, we obviously pass that on to Rob, who deals with the finance side. But just to explain how that kind of how we put that in front of customers, what options we give them at that stage before we introduce. How does that work?
Yeah, so initially we'll put our document together for the solution now, whether that be for just a general support agreement, which is what you would class as the thin air element of a finance agreement, or it'd be a full project side of everything. So, you know, a full server infrastructure upgrade and hardware. Everything all gets laid out with the full itemized costs of what the customer is looking to purchase. And then secondly, from there, there's a full breakdown then of the finance side of everything, of what that becomes as a cost to each of those elements over the period of time that we're discussing. You know, there'll be like 3 years or 5 years. And then there's an indicative price in there of what that would be as a monthly or a quarterly figure, because we can look at those as a monthly payment or a quarterly payment. Does include the rate that's on there, and then there's a full breakdown there of everything that comes down to it, with Synergy Finance information and contact details that's on there. So from a customer's point of view, should they decide, yeah, we're happy to go down the finance side of 3 or 5 years, we'll complete everything in terms of our side on our proposal, get those figures there to the customer. Once they're happy with that, that's where we introduce Synergy Finance on to the customer, and they can have those conversations, and they create all of their paperwork for them as such.
And then when it comes over to you, Rob, what's the process then? Is it a fairly straightforward process for the customer at that stage?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, just to go back a slight stage, is that Darren will actually use our online portal called the Synergy Partner Portal, and you'll be able to formulate a finance quote on our behalf. But what you'll be able to do then as well is you'll be able to do a very soft credit check on the customer, so you can see whether it's achievable. So some of the hard work has already been done, to be fair. So when it comes over to us, we may need some more financial up-to-date information, but you know, that's pretty standard nowadays because of COVID. The lenders want to see what happened during COVID and how most companies have coped. So we tend to, you know, engage with the customer, ask for some maybe accounts management information, maybe some bank statements, and maybe just try to understand a little bit how they've coped during COVID. I mean, the lenders do like what's called a COVID statement at the moment, so they need to know kind of things like how many people they have furloughed, how the income was affected, how the business sort of tightened their belt a little bit to cope with it. So we understand the bigger picture, and then what we tend to do is we then underwrite it in-house here, and then once we understand the full picture, we can then decide which lender to put it with. Because we're a brokerage, we do have access to over 100 lenders, so we tend to know where the deal will lie with pretty quickly. But you know, in these challenging times, a lot of lenders have tightened their belts and they've changed their stance on credit. So it's difficult sometimes to truly appreciate where an opportunity is going to go and stay. So time to get things underwritten is taking a little bit longer than normal. We used to say 24 hours. We're probably looking at 3 or 4 days nowadays.
And obviously, I know we've got another video out at the moment where yourself and George have had a chat about some more recent options that have come out. So there are different ways, aren't there, that people can finance these things, about finance as a whole. But there's loans, there's leases, there's the new government support. What sort of products are people generally going towards at the moment in the current situation?
Yeah, well, I think we obviously had the bounce back loans and the coronavirus business interruption loans that the government sort of released to help businesses through the COVID period. So a lot of companies have accessed them. I think it was £64 billion worth in the end that businesses across the country took advantage of. And some of that money's still out there. There's some companies still sat on that money, deciding whether they're actually going to use it for their investment or, literally pay it back without any interest, which has been the order of the day. So that some of that money's still out there. So some people are still using that. If they've run out of that money, there is what's called the recovery loan scheme, which the government have been promoting. That came out in April, as well as the super deduction scheme, and that's very similar to the bounce back and the CBILS loans, but in the sense of it has an 80% backing from the government. Now, there's some lenders who are offering this recovery loan scheme, and they're not just for loans, but also for asset finance as well. And we have a couple of lenders now who are using it in a way that's quite creative and helpful to businesses that are looking to recover. So, for instance, there's an initial 12-month period where companies can have low start repayments, sort of 60 to 70% lower than the normal repayment. So it helps them recover through this period for the next 12 months, and then the repayments go up to cover that off. So that's quite a nice product to access, where it's just giving those companies out there need a little bit of breathing room, but also enables them to invest and take advantage of that super deduction tax scheme as well. So that's a great product out there at the moment. But the standard finance, leasing, loans, they're all out there. They're just a little bit more difficult to get approved nowadays because of the appetite of the lenders. But lenders are still looking to lend.
And do we know how long those new schemes are going to be in place for and going to be around for?
Yeah, the recovery loan scheme supposedly meant to end this December. I don't think it will. I think it'll be extended beyond that. And also the super deduction tax scheme will last until 2023, I think end of March 2023. So these schemes are out there. People should be, if they're not taking advantage of them now, they should be certainly looking into them and understanding them better so they can prime themselves to use them.
Yeah, brilliant. And then final question, really. So we've covered a few things there around tax benefits, around cash flow. What do you think the biggest benefit is of financing a thing like IT for a business, Rob? What do you think if there was one thing you could say to someone, that's why you should do it, what do you think that is?
I think it's sort of matching the outgoings towards that investment with your income. And what I mean by that, so let's look at, like I spoke to you about earlier, about assets. If you're bringing in an asset to your business, is that going to generate an income? Generally, IT doesn't generate an income, but it might make your staff, quicker at processing whatever they're processing. It might make them work a bit faster. So therefore, it is generating an income across the board. So the fact is, you are basically using that asset to make yourself slicker and better. So I'd always say finance IT, because at the end of the day, it is a very quickly depreciating asset, and there's no point at the end of 3-5 years saying I own all this IT and then suddenly it's all failing, because at the end of the day you've got to upgrade it at some point.
Perfect. Brilliant. Well, thank you all for your input, and thanks, Rob, for joining us. And obviously we'll be back soon with some more videos. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.